Good afternoon. Welcome to Eliminating Barriers to Acceleration through Territory Optimization. My name is Ken Kramer. I'm the Vice President of Sales and Marketing with TerrAlign. I'd first like to thank InsideSales.com for inviting me to speak at their virtual Sales Acceleration Summit of 2016. Challenges that many companies, virtually all companies, are facing is how to sell more with less. CEOs, CFOs are setting financial guidance to the public in many cases and putting the burden on VPs of sales, sales operations to figure out how to be able to achieve and surpass those targets, sometimes with a limited number of resources. Companies are trying to determine how many reps do we need in which roles, which accounts and prospects should they be calling on, how do we design the territories to maximize the resources that we have. By answering these questions, you will enable sales reps to then fully leverage other tools you'll hear about throughout this summit to help accelerate their sales processes. Ultimately, what it comes down to is, regardless of how good a sales rep is and how many tools and solutions they have at their disposal to accelerate their efforts, if they're in a territory that simply is not workable or does not have sufficient opportunity in it, they won't be successful and you won't be maximizing the resources that you have at hand. In looking at things with the broader picture, from sales reps, sales managers, sales operations, each of these groups has tasks and objectives and a set of tools to help them achieve those. But as recently mentioned, a poor territory leaves a rep in a rough situation. Our view of accelerating the entire process starts at the top with sales operations from a planning perspective. Amongst some of the things they need to focus on every year is setting territory, setting quotas, and setting incentive compensation plans. Field managers need to hire, coach, forecast, and meet those goals and work with their reps to be able to do so. And the reps will do anything and everything they can to meet their number, but some of these things would be optimizing their routes, selling and presenting to their prospects and accounts, managing those relationships, and closing the business, signing the contracts. Throughout all of these, and throughout this virtual summit, you'll hear about tools to help with this. Starting at the top left, we're going to dig into the optimizing territories and see how that, for lack of better words, trickles down to benefit some of these other focus areas. Today, as I said, we're going to look deeper into the territory alignment, territory optimization side of things. Why do companies realign? What are the challenges involved with modifying coverage models? What is the approach, scientific, and also leveraging the internal knowledge within your organizations to best optimize your sales resources? The benefits that you'll recognize this. Obviously, nobody's going to go forward, implement solutions, and change practices without recognizing an ROI. And then we'll take a quick look at a case study and leave you with a few best practices. So why do companies realign? In a word, change. Anytime a company is going through a change, whether it's growth, mergers, acquisitions, combination of business units, product lines, whatever it may be, any kind of change requires companies to look at how their sales reps are selling. If your company is acquiring another company and you have two reps in the same territory selling similar products, things might need to be re-looked at. Is that the best way to leverage those resources? Can one rep be selling both products into a smaller territory and therefore covering more accounts in less time? You need to be able to manage ongoing changes. There could be tweaks throughout the year on a quarter-to-quarter basis. Typically, bigger modifications are looked at more on an annual basis. Most companies, whether they recognize it or not, are not working in a balanced environment. The typical view of things through an evolutionary process leaves them with somewhere in the realm of 10 to 20% of the reps working in territories that don't have enough work or opportunity to be considered a territory, whereas another 10 to 20% have too much work or opportunity to be considered a full territory. Both of these have negative impacts on your organization. The reps that are in the overloaded territories typically look like the all-stars. They're assumed to be the top 10%. The reality is they may or may not be good reps, but in all likelihood they're cherry-picking the best opportunities. They're meeting their number quarter over quarter. Their managers are afraid to change their territory because they're meeting their number quarter over quarter. But at the same time, they're costing increased incentive compensation dollars through accelerators, and in all likelihood, they're losing market share. So the reps in those overloaded territories might be hitting their quotas, but they're leaving a lot of money on the table, a lot of business out there for your competitors. At the other end of the spectrum, no matter how hard a rep works in an underserved territory, they're never going to hit their quota. It's demoralizing. They're viewed as the lower 10%. We often hear managers say, no matter what I do, I can't hire a good rep out of X city, and they blame it on the city, when the reality is perhaps the design of the territory does not allow any rep, qualified or otherwise, to be successful in it. That creates continual churn, which causes more expense with an organization. The way companies need to view these things is create equitable territories for everybody, and then that will allow you to determine potentially who your overachievers and underachievers are, and it will allow those overachievers to be hitting their goals and their quotas and at the same time achieving maximum market share. They're not leaving money on the table for the competitors. So ideally, you're giving every territory a level playing field to be successful. The objectives of optimizing territories, as we've talked about previously, we need to create that balance. You want that level playing field, but you're looking for that balance to be created based upon a strategic metric. In many cases, we are talking about workload. It's to some extent an industry-based decision or a company-based decision. Our experience shows industries like pharmaceuticals, medical products, consumer packaged goods are very often looking at a workload metric, and it is extremely capacity driven. They need to make X number of calls to their accounts. They know how long those calls take, and they expect certain results will follow from that. Other industries, high tech for instance, very often looking at opportunity. They want to put X number of accounts that meet a certain criteria into each territory. Therefore, every territory has the same potential, and they're less concerned about the actual hourly work that's involved. You do want to create territories that are configured to enable reps to see more accounts in less time. So you want them to be efficient. You want accounts clustered together. You want to minimize drive time is what it really comes down to. And you want these territories to be created as I mentioned, in an equitable manner with regard to work opportunity and quota. Quotas really should be set based after territories are created, based upon the opportunity that exists within that. So while they might be equitable, they might not be the same. So why is this so hard? Well, it doesn't have to be hard. However, many companies view things as, well, this is the way we've always done it. It seems to work. There's a big effort that goes into something that nobody knows necessarily what's going to come out of it. So there's always that history that you have to get over. The tools that people had used historically, spreadsheets, maybe Google Maps, definitely a lot of gut feel. Many organizations allow field managers to create the territories. Many of these field managers have come out of the field themselves. So while they have a lot of local knowledge, they don't necessarily apply the science to it that is necessary. Speaking of science, one of the reasons why this is so hard is mathematically, there's thousands, if not millions, of possibilities on how to configure territories. The more accounts that you're dealing with, the more reps that you're dealing with, the more possibilities and different approaches that could be taken and outcomes that could come out of this. So it's not a simple, well, I'll try it this way or I'll try it that way. It's thousands, if not millions, of possible configurations that could come out of it. A change is hard in organizations. Reps will push back. Managers will push back. There's always pushback. So having a scientific approach, having math behind it to be able to back up what and why, and then apply that local knowledge will help with that change. This last point, it's not easy to fix something if you don't know there's a problem. It's life goes on, whether you have good territories or bad territories. Again, some of the blame might fall in the wrong places, but you need to do the analysis to determine why some territories are more successful than others. Is it the rep or is it the territory? So the approach that we're going to discuss and that we recommend looks at segmentation, size, align, and then integrate. So you need to understand which accounts would be served by which type of reps. So if you're dealing with SMB versus enterprise or vertical approach, you need to segment those accounts, determine how many reps you have to work in each of those different sales teams or alignments, and then align each of those the best way possible, and then integrate that into those other systems, that quota setting process, the incentive compensation, your CRM, to be able to execute on the new plan. We're going to focus on the alignment specifically and make the assumption at this stage that we understand the segmentation and the sizing. So from a territory alignment perspective, we're looking at it at the lowest level. A territory is a job description. It's one sales rep, possibly a team if there's a specialist perhaps. They're going to call on a set of accounts, and they're going to call on them a certain amount of times. There's frequency, and then they're expected to produce a certain amount of revenue. From a mathematical perspective, as we mentioned, workload. Work is frequency times duration plus travel time. How many times am I visiting an account? How long am I visiting them for? 15 minutes, 60 minutes, etc. And how long does it take me to get there? So that's the capacity and the work that is necessary to serve a particular territory. When we're looking at the objectives, a good territory is balanced with respect to the other territories. It requires the effort of one rep, just like all of the other territories. So we want to look at things holistically, especially when we're in the planning stage, looking at this from a sales ops perspective. It doesn't require less than one person's effort or more than one person's effort. And this kind of comes to the whole You want your reps not to be scratch golfers, but you also want them to have a little bit of a life. We also need to focus on natural barriers when we're designing territories that might look great and you give everybody roughly the same number of accounts or the same number of work. Drive time is definitely a factor. You don't want to be creating a territory that's split by a river when no bridges exist. When we're doing this, it's not simply looking at a map or looking at spreadsheets. You want to leverage algorithms and optimization technology. The optimization technology that exists will look at multiple things at the same time and do the math that is extremely difficult to do otherwise. You're trying to balance on the selling effort, that workload, whatever that metric is that's most important to you. You're trying to minimize the travel time, creating compact territories, and you're also trying to minimize the disruption, the number of accounts that move from one territory to another. Well, going through a realignment process, there's always going to be some disruption, but if you can reduce that, that will reduce the overall negativity throughout the sales force saying that was my account, I have a relationship here and there, and allow people to move on and recognize I'm okay giving up a couple accounts as long as my overall territory is a better territory to work. Those 3 bullet points often work in opposition to each other, so trying to find the right balance amongst those 3 is critical to an overall successful realignment. Other things that come into play is location, not only of just the accounts, but also sales rep location, if there's expansion territories, closures, relocations of reps, those type of things. If there's a branch office that people are forced to work out of, anything like that that comes into play needs to be considered. Lastly, when going through the realignment process, as we've mentioned before, you do want that local knowledge. It is critical from a rollout perspective to have the local buy-in and also the knowledge for that tweaks and changes. Sales managers will know anomalies that algorithms will not. So the benefits of optimizing sales resources, you have the ability to increase sales and profits by 4 to 12% by fully utilizing the resources that you have. So by rejiggering who calls on whom, you're able to call on more accounts in less time. More time in front of clients, less time in front of the windshield. You're going to be able to reduce the travel costs, so selling expenses, by 10 to 15%. Also, by having the equitable territories, you'll be able to recognize the over and under achievers and reduce turnover within your field. You may have gone through many times where you continually lost reps, and you didn't know if they were good or bad reps, but they were leaving because they didn't have territories where they felt they could be successful in. In many cases, they could have been very good reps, and you weren't giving them the opportunity to be successful. It costs you and it costs them. Lastly, equitable territories lead to the right quota and the right incentive plan, and therefore motivated, focused sales reps. When a rep starts the year and they understand their quota, their territory, and their comp plan, then they're ready to roll. Until that happens, there's definitely a lot of hedging going on, and they're calling on perhaps accounts they know they're going to keep, but they're not working at full speed until they understand those 3 things together. Quick case study from a longtime customer of ours, Thomson Reuters Financial. They've been using our solution for many years. I'll leave most of this up here for you to read through yourselves, but the crux of it is they've been able to improve the efficiency of their sales force. So their sales reps are seeing more accounts. They're able to reduce the time it takes to come out with the best possible alignments and coverage models for their field force. So those people in sales ops are no longer banging their heads against the wall they're coming out with better results in less time. And they're able to execute on these new alignments by integrating into their CRM and ensuring that everybody knows who to call on and when, and it's accurate as opposed to having any confusion. I'll leave you with a few best practices for territory design, which is relatively timely right now as we're into October. This is, by many, considered the sales planning season, getting ready for January 1. So, balance territories on metrics used similar to the ones you pay out commissions. If you're paying out reps to sell new business, make sure you're designing territories with prospects and potential in mind, as opposed to customers and historic business if they're not getting paid on renewal business. Build territories from the ground up. So don't design regions and then districts and then territories at the lowest level. Design from the ground up. Create the territories first. Mathematically, you'll have better territories across the board if you're not eliminating half or two-thirds of the country as part of the process. And then group territories to create districts and districts to create regions, etc., or whatever your verbiage is. Build territories around customers, not reps. While it's possible to say, I have a rep located here, build the territory around them, in most cases we recommend building good territories around customers. Customers often stay longer than reps do. And if you have a good territory built around customers, then the reps likely will stay longer as well. Base the quotas on the opportunity that exists within the territory after the territory is optimized. So don't give everybody the same quota just because you've now created balanced territories on workload. Create those territories based upon workload so everybody's used to their fullest capacity, so each rep is working 32 to 35 hours a week. And then, based upon the opportunity in that territory, set the quotas. This will allow you to have different quotas for reps who are seeing more accounts in New York and New Jersey versus those in South Dakota or Iowa. And then get the field managers involved in the process. Field managers will be happy if their fingerprints are on the territory. One, they'll be able to explain it to their sales reps why it's fair and equitable. And two, they do have local knowledge that systems don't have. So leverage everything you have. You'll end up with better territories, and you'll end up with a better change management process. Thank you. Appreciate your time today. My contact information is below. If you do have any follow-up questions, I'd be happy to get back to you. Have a great afternoon.